Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Hockey Hacks podcast, a proud member of the Hockey Podcast Network and the official podcast of Left Wing Lock, your number one source for fantasy hockey intelligence. I'm Devin Davidson, your host. With me, as always, Bruce Gunther, John Enns, Tyler Homan, and joining us tonight, the man himself, Mike McLaughlin. Mike, how you doing?
I am doing great. How are you guys?
Good. I have to say I missed the bandana. Where's the bandana?
Yeah. No bandana tonight.
All right.
Yeah. It wasn't going to hide the hair well enough. Had to go with a hat.
All right. Fair enough. How's your summer been? We haven't talked to you for a few weeks. What's been going on?
Yeah. Well, it sounds weird, but the summer is a really busy time at Left Wing Lock. There's no games, so we don't have to do goalies and line combos, but we're doing draft kit stuff day in, day out. So yeah, it's been busy. I got a little short trip in for camping earlier this summer, and that was great. But now it's full steam ahead through September.
Cool. So when can our listeners and your fans expect an update on the guide?
August 1st, always, rain or shine.
All right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, well, we're looking forward to it. I have to ask you, since you're a Philadelphia Flyers fan, can you give us your thoughts on how the draft went and maybe your thoughts on D'Angelo for next season? And did you like that move, yes or no?
Yeah, okay. So for the draft, I am no expert on prospects. I rarely see hockey that's not in the NHL. So I won't speak up and sound very dumb about the Flyers draft pick, other than to say I'm happy that they chose a guy who, when he walked on stage, he looked like a man. And John's laughing. What I mean by that is, for the past few years, we've picked up guys like Morgan Frost and Joel Farabee, who I like both of those players, especially Farabee. But if you watched Farabee in his first couple of years in the NHL, he was very easy to knock off the puck. He was extremely, extremely skinny, and he had to work really hard in the offseason to kind of build up muscle. And he's still not a very strong guy. And so for me, it was nice to see a guy walk on stage who's already a man. Like, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. You're not going to take the puck from this guy by, putting your shoulder into him. You're going to have to do a little bit more than that. So that's my observation. I know that's very limited and superficial, but
that's all right. That's all good.
As far as the Flyers off season and just D'Angelo and all that, well, again, I'm happy they held the number 5 overall. I know there were rumors out there about them potentially taking DeBrincat in a trade and losing that number 5 pick, and I'm glad they didn't do that. As far as free agency goes, I'm glad they didn't go after Johnny Gaudreau, or if they did go after him, I'm glad they failed. And I'm glad they didn't really offer any big contracts to anybody.
Kept their powder dry.
Nothing that they can't get out of down the road. For instance, D'Angelo's contract it's 2 years. If it doesn't work out, no big deal. I guess the main thing I would say about D'Angelo's contract is, if you want the Flyers' power play to get better, he's the guy. And the Flyers' power play needs to get better. I've got 2 nuggets for you guys tonight. The first one is, the Flyers scored 30 power play goals last season. In a vacuum, that number might not really mean much to people listening. But let me put it in perspective. That is the 3rd lowest total power play goals since the NHL started recording that stat in 1977.
Yikes.
Wow.
And remember, that includes a lot of seasons that didn't even play 82 games.
Wow.
So the Flyers desperately need help on the power play. The second nugget might be even more alarming than the first. The Flyers' shooting percentage on the power play was 7.8%. And just to remind all the listeners out there, the average shooting percentage at even strength is 8.5%. So the Flyers actually scored goals more easily against 5 opponents than they did against 4 opponents. And that's ridiculous.
Wow.
From a power play perspective, I'm gung-ho. I'm 100% behind D'Angelo on this signing. I think he's going to help the power play tremendously. And then the other tie in there for D'Angelo is that the Flyers are not being very clear with what's going to happen with Ryan Ellis in the 2022-2023 season.
Right. Yep.
There seems to be a very likely chance that he's not going to play at all.
Oh boy.
And if he doesn't play, the Flyers all of a sudden need a right defenseman again. And it can't be Justin Braun. It just can't be. He's perfectly well suited as a third line right defenseman. I'm happy he's back. But we cannot go into the season with him as the first pairing defenseman.
Okay. So there you have it. There's the Philadelphia offseason so far.
Yeah, my hope from the coming season, honestly, is another top 5 pick.
Maybe Connor Bedard?
If you look at all of the Stanley Cup champions over the last 14 seasons, 13 of them have one thing in common. That one thing in common is that all 13 of those teams drafted in the top 5 at least 3 times in building up to their Stanley Cup victory. And it's no coincidence that happened after the salary cap was introduced.
Right.
And so even though I don't like the idea of tanking, I don't wish my team to lose, it seems to be the only way to win in the NHL. I mean, only one team has won in 14 years without 3 top 5 picks.
Yeah.
And that was the Boston Bruins in 2011.
And they were almost out of that series.
They were. They only won. I don't say only, but it was because of Tim Thomas, right? I mean, he
was a big part of that series, no question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, before I forget to mention it, episode 71, tonight we're doing our 2022 NHL free agent recap and just some loose projections, maybe more so over-unders just for some fun here. And this episode is brought to you by Pro Hockey Life. We're a new partner of Pro Hockey Life, the ultimate hockey mega store. So anything, apparel, hockey equipment, street hockey equipment, training, fitness, you name it, they got it. The link will be in the description if you want to check it out. And, of course, we had mentioned Johnny Gaudreau, which is a nice segue into John's list. John, I think, did you throw this down or did I? I don't remember.
I think you threw it down, but I 100% agree because he was on the list regardless. So
Okay. Well, Mike, as you mentioned, he didn't go home, right? So, John, what's your take on this situation?
On the situation? I got nothing on the situation. I think the guy's a moron, but I don't know. I just don't like the guy. He's not my type of hockey player. And by my type of hockey player, he's 5'6" and
Okay, easy.
weighs less than Tyler. So
I
just think people need to run him down and call it a day.
Okay. The decision to me was mind-boggling. Like I just
it didn't make sense. No.
He left, was it $15 million on the table? Turned down Calgary's offer. And like the whole narrative was he wanted to be closer to family, wanted to go to a contender, obviously wanted to get paid. Well, he didn't go to a contender. He left money on the table. And he's still, I don't know, was it an hour and a half flight from home? Like he's closer, granted, and he doesn't have to go through customs. But to me, this was a very interesting decision by Johnny Gaudreau.
He just wanted out.
I don't think he got too many offers, to be honest with you.
Well, it sounded he got Jersey. Jersey had offered him more money.
There was Jersey,
Calgary.
Columbus, Calgary.
There may have been
That
the
was
Islanders
pretty much
in there
it.
too, it sounds like.
Sorry?
It sounds like the Islanders were in there too.
Yes.
I think the Islanders were in there, but I don't think they could offer him the money that Jersey and Columbus.
Right.
But really, if he's going for home, you would have thought the Islanders or Jersey, right? But money, okay. Well, why wouldn't you have stayed in Calgary then, right? If you're looking for, like you said, it makes no sense because he's now in Columbus, where that contract isn't going to look great for a while because there's nobody there to support him right now.
They got to hope that Liney's back, and that's not a guarantee at this point, right? I think he's been qualified, right? $7.5 million bucks. And that could be actually an effective line, but then who's your centerman? It's probably Boone Jenner, right? Is that who we're looking at?
That or
Jenner
Johnson.
or Roslovic, right?
Yeah.
Did they put Johnson between them? Kent Johnson?
No, not yet. I don't think. Not this early. I think because Boone Jenner played like 23 minutes a game last year, right?
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to play that top line. But Tyler, what's your thoughts on this?
I don't think he really cares who he's going to play with because nobody's going to care there if he scores 60 points or 130. Like who's going to, like a couple, like the 3 media guys that work there are going to be upset about it. Who else is going to, it's not the same as in Calgary. I think he does, like I'm not a Flames fan. I know that's a big surprise here, but I think he does owe them some sort of an explanation because he said 3 different things. And if you just decided you're not going to go back there at like the 11th hour and then say it's for family, but you don't really end up going anywhere for family, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if I was a Flames fan, I'd be pretty upset because, you hear one thing from a star player and then they do something else and they don't really talk about it. I'd be pretty upset about that.
You think him and his agent overread the market or didn't read the market properly?
I think they kind of cornered themselves into they're going to go to one of 3 places, and then the money wasn't there. And I think a lot of free agents are realizing that too. I think Nazem Kadri's another one, realizing that, you can get money in turn, but you're going to be in Seattle. And Arizona's not going to spend money. So anybody that has money probably isn't going to spend it, which is why Evander Kane's still in Edmonton.
Very true.
Yeah, to me, I feel like it was pretty clear that Gaudreau wanted out of Calgary. I don't know why, but he did. And I suspect he had a pretty good feeling that the Flyers wanted him. And unfortunately for him, the entire NHL knew the Flyers had to dump salary to get him. And so they just said, you're going to pay. Give us 2 first-round picks if you want JVR off your list.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And thankfully, the Flyers said no. The Flyers fan base is going nuts over this, by the way. I've listened to way too many podcasts over the past, 10 days, and everybody hates it. They all wanted Gaudreau. They think Fletcher should be fired immediately for not trading JVR for anything.
I think Fletcher probably should be fired anyways, but maybe not for that.
That may be true. I don't think it should be over the JVR Gaudreau situation though.
No.
I bet teams were asking a fortune to take his contract. Look what Vegas had to pay to give up Max Pacioretty.
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan Coughlin, is it Coughlin or Coughlin? I don't know how to say his name. Coughlin. But he's no chump change. That guy appears to be a pretty decent player. Yeah. And Carolina got him for free along with Max Pacioretty. Well, so just imagine how much the Flyers would have had to pay to get rid of JVR.
Yeah. They would have. No question. Vegas painted themselves into a corner. Good. And it doesn't upset me. Yeah, it doesn't upset me at all. I love it, actually.
Me neither. I'm very happy.
Yeah, I think for Gaudreau, he just didn't want to be in Calgary. I think it was he's one of those American players that doesn't enjoy playing up here, doesn't enjoy playing in the fishbowl. Not that all of them don't enjoy it, but some don't, right? And I think he just wanted to play somewhere quiet, and that was part of it. I did hear that his wife is a is a nurse of some kind, and there's some tie to Nationwide Arena and the hospital there, and maybe they greased the wheels and got her a job, right? So I think that might have been part of the equation too, but it's all hearsay. Who knows?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I
very
suspect-
strange decision.
I suspect that would have happened in any city he went to, right?
She was probably getting a job anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. But all right.
And maybe it is a good distance from the rest of his family. Like, if he's actually in New Jersey or Philadelphia, where it's like an hour and a half, they just show up
Yeah.
at your house. Now they got to give you 8 hours warning that they're coming over. So maybe it's not that bad.
If you want to hop on a plane, you hop on a plane. It's quick. So
Yep.
all right. Anything else on Johnny Gaudreau or John's list this week?
I think
Just
it's
don't like the
Daddy.
guy.
Just don't like the guy. Classic John line. Okay. Well, we're doing a bit of a different episode tonight, like I said. So we're just going to cover the free agency recap. So let's jump into it. Mike, I'm going to ask you first. Who are the biggest winners in this year's free agency? And then conversely, who are the biggest losers in your mind?
For me, I see the Ottawa Senators seem to be a pretty clear top team in free agency. I think they had a great offseason. I'm actually kind of looking forward to watching them play in the coming season. Part of that's because I like Claude Giroux, of course, but I also just like a lot of the players in that Ottawa top six from both a fantasy perspective and a real life perspective. So Ottawa's up there. I think Carolina made some decent moves. They lost a lot too.
The only thing I don't like about Carolina now is their center depth. Like if Kotkaniemi's your second line center, I think they're in a bit of trouble there.
Yeah, if he's not up to par, they're actually in grave danger, right? Like falling out of that East. Not falling out of the playoffs, but just not being able to compete with the top talent in the East.
Okay.
So Carolina's, for me, they're kind of a hit or miss. Like if they have the pieces that can come up and replace the guys they lost, that's fine. Because Pacioretty is, going to put up 35 goals, right? And Brent Burns on that back end is looking good.
Yeah, I like both those moves. I think. Well, do you want to jump into it? Let's just talk about the Hurricanes here quickly, since we're on that topic. So, Max Pacioretty, as you'd said earlier, they basically got him for nothing. If he can stay healthy, I think is a 40-goal, 40-assist season, is that reasonable, assuming he plays all 82 games?
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy number to think about. Especially if he gets that top-line job alongside Aho.
And then do you think it's going to be, do they load up and put Teravainen on that top line, or do you see something like, do they put Jarvis up there again like they had him last year?
Yeah, it could go either way, really. I think I have Jarvis penciled in there, but only because that's what they were doing at the end of last season.
Right. Okay. And then Brent Burns. There's lots of chatter about him, obviously. So I like Brent Burns there for next year. I think that's a player I would target at some point in the draft. Tyler, I know you're a Brent Burns fan from years past. Maybe not so much the past couple seasons in San Jose, but I think his role is different, right? Like in San Jose, the past couple seasons, he's had more of a defensive role, and he's been asked to shoulder that load, and he's splitting power play time with Erik Karlsson. So now I think his role probably changes a bit, where maybe he's not playing 26 minutes a night. Maybe it's 22 to 24 minutes, and he's just a power play specialist more so than he has been in the past couple of years. But how do you see that shaking out, Mike?
Yeah, immediately at even strength, the minutes are going to get easier for him for a number of reasons. One, he's on a better team. Carolina typically outshoots their opponents, so that's a plus for them compared to the recent San Jose Shark teams. You mentioned a second ago about Bob Bugner and how he used Brent Burns, and we wrote about this in the draft kit each summer too. That Bugner was putting Burns into a heavily defensive role where his offensive zone starts were only about 40%, and that's not going to be the case in Carolina. He's slated to play with Jacob Slavin on what they call their top defensive pairing, and that unit plays more heavily offensive geared minutes, and they don't typically face the highest quality of competition either. That's usually Brady Shea and and Pesci, right?
Yeah.
So Burns' minutes are going to be easier for a couple of reasons at even strength. He's going to get that power play role on the top unit, and he's the lone defenseman on that unit. So
do you think one thing too is his shot volume the past couple seasons has kind of gone down? Do you think that's more due to deployment? Like, do you see him shooting a bit more this coming season?
I do, but I am worried that he's old.
He is 37. Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, it's hard to pull those two things apart because they happened at the same time, right?
Right.
Burns was getting older and his role shifted significantly. So it's going to be hard to peel those two apart when you're making your projections. I do think he will improve this season, but I'm a little bit concerned about the shot volume.
Okay. So just a really loose projection here. I had 16 goals, 52 assists for 68 points. Are you taking the over-under on something like that?
I am looking at my list, and why don't I see him? There he is. What's when you go even on that?
Push.
Push. I'm going to push.
Okay. So that's probably a reasonable projection there then.
Yeah.
Okay. There you have it. So Tyler, I will be sniping him before you do, just so you're aware. Keep an eye out, just so you know. And then Mike, I just wanted to circle back. I didn't give you a chance to finish the second part of that question. Biggest loser in free agency so far, in your mind?
Biggest loser.
You for saying circle back.
And
John.
I'm sorry. I had to.
you had to. Okay, that's fair. Shots fired. I see how it is.
Nice. Oh man, who messed up in free agency this year?
We did bringing John back.
I think a lot of people will say the Philadelphia Flyers, but I guess it depends on what your motivations are. From a fantasy perspective, I think the Flyers would be at the bottom of the list. They did terrible. But from a real life perspective, I want them to get a low pick, an early pick. So I think they made the right choice. I don't know. I think Calgary's in a little bit of trouble, right? I mean,
Yep,
they just lost they just lost a guy who scored 115 points.
Yep.
And at the moment, they have not replaced him.
And I just read that they opted for
Arbitration.
team arbitration, right, for Matthew Tkachuk.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a chance they could lose him too, right? Like, do you think does Tkachuk want to stay, or does he kind of look at it and go, "We lost that guy. Do I want to stick around? Can we beat the Edmonton Oilers year in and year out?" Like I
don't know what happens at this point with him.
I'm laughing at Tyler. He's like, "No, they don't beat the Oilers. No chance."
No.
What about a team like St. Louis, Mike? Because they lost Ville Husso. They got a third-round pick for him, but they lost Ville Husso. They lost Perron. They just signed Robert Thomas to a $8.12 million contract, which Tyler can't get over.
Massive.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
So they kind of seem, and they could still lose Tarasenko here as well because he still wants out of St. Louis. So, I mean, they kind of seem to be a bit of a loser here to me in the offseason.
Yeah, they definitely got weaker, right?
Yeah. Seattle's another one that maybe comes to mind. Like, what's your take on the Burakovsky signing?
I don't mind that signing too much. I think he'll be all right. They could slot him in the top six easily, potentially top line, and then they've got room on their power play for improvement too. So he could slot into either one of those units. So I mean, from a fantasy perspective, Burakovsky's looking decent. I don't know about Seattle as a team as a whole, though.
Yeah, like I said, I think his fantasy value takes it's tough, right? Because he's getting better deployment, most likely. He's going to get top power play time, but he's also not playing with Nathan McKinnon or Mikko Rantanen anymore. Like, he wasn't there permanently, right? But I mean, he's not getting that opportunity. Caudrey was the other guy he played with fairly regularly last season.
That's right.
So a better deployment, maybe not as great production overall. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think he also had some of his numbers, I think, were boosted by luck last season too. So he may be headed downward anyway.
Okay. I had him at 20 goals, 30 assists. Is that too generous for him in Seattle?
Where do I have this guy? Why can't I read this list? I have. Yeah, I have him coming in at about. This is kind of an unreviewed projection at this point, but I have him at 58 points.
Okay. Okay. Good enough. All right, let's continue down the path here. What did you think of the Anaheim Ducks? They got Ryan Strome, 5 years, $25 million, so $5 million AAV, and Frank Vetrano, 3 years, $10.95 million. Either guy fantasy relevant in your mind for next season?
I think Strome has some decent value there. He'll likely be the second line center, right? And maybe a chance at the top power play unit as well.
Okay. Yeah, he could. To me, he's kind of a 50-point guy. Like he's going to move away from Panarin, but there's still some good young players in that top 6 in Anaheim. He should be somewhat productive in a points-only league, right?
Yeah.
Frank Vetrano, he'll probably end up on the top line, I'm thinking, next to Zegras.
That's well, I have him penciled in too. I think they'll give him a look at that. Maybe at the first line left wing.
Do you think I'm probably not that high? I know I got 20 goals, 20 assists for next season. That might be a little low for him if he stays on that top line, but
yeah, I don't have him much higher than that either.
Okay. We covered Carolina. Colorado, they opted to sign Lehkonen to a 5-year, $22.5 million contract. Obviously played a big role for them in the playoffs. You know, how fantasy relevant is he, though? Like, will he see time in the top 6, assuming a guy like Caudrey doesn't come back?
I think he could play top 6, but I'm like you. I don't see him as being a fantasy player.
Yeah.
He's one of these guys who's, in real life, you want him on your team.
Sure.
He does all the right things, and his puck possession numbers are always good, no matter what kind of zone start you give him. But there's just no production attached to it, at least not from him.
Okay. Do you think there's a chance Caudrey signs in Colorado? Like we were talking about this earlier, teams trying to clear up cap space. Is there any chance that he's kind of holding out for Colorado to clear some cap space?
It'd be kind of neat if he stuck around. This Colorado team is very good. And they are, I mentioned that stat earlier about 13 Cup teams having at least 3 top 5 picks. Colorado has 4. And so I'd like to see them keep as much of that team together as they can. I don't know if they will. I mean, one guy I think they could move out to help themselves out is probably Samuel Girard.
Oh, I was going to say Cale Makar, but...
Makar.
Cale Makar.
Yeah, Cale Makar.
I don't think he's going anywhere.
But, I mean, they basically won the playoffs without Girard, right? He was injured the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, was it first round? I think he had that get drilled into the boards.
Yeah, so I mean that's a very business-like way of looking at things. Like, hey, we won without you. We don't need you.
Yeah,
but
maybe they don't.
That's maybe where I would look if I were looking to free up salary to keep Caudrey.
And then I wanted to pick your brain too on one, their goaltending tandem with Francouz and Georgiev, and then 2, the Nichushkin contract, because I know Tyler despises that contract. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on Valeri Nichushkin for next season and his contract moving forward.
Yeah, so I'll take this one at a time, I guess. So he was really good for the Avalanche, I thought.
He was.
What is the number on that contract? I don't even remember what it is now.
8 years.
Times 6.1.
125.
Oh yeah. That's gonna hurt eventually. That is definitely gonna hurt.
The thing is like, why did you even? You would think about it. Short term is what you would want to sign him, and maybe a higher cap hit than what you would want.
Yeah.
So you're in your window, and maybe in 4 years, the window closes a little bit, and you can move on from guys like that. But 8 years. Like, what was he asking for on a 5-year deal or a 4-year deal?
That's
like,
a
that
really
number
good
would have
question.
been insane, too. It would have been Draisaitl money for a good playoff run. It's crazy. Good for
Yeah,
him, though.
and
And his
maybe
agent must get a good percentage of that because good for him.
and maybe this whole Caudrey business is kind of tied into that too, right?
Yeah.
Is
If I was Caudrey, I'd be so mad that they wasted all that money on him. I would go to Calgary. like it's ridiculous. Like you can move Gerard, and I bet you could give Caudrey 7 times 5, and he'd want to stay there because he had his most success there. He won a cup there. It's the only team that's going to give him around that's still going to be competitive in 5 years. I think it's easy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think at this point, like I thought Washington was the most likely destination for Caudrey with the Backstrom injury. And then when they grabbed Dylan Strome, that kind of put an end to that. So I don't see that happening anymore, obviously. So for me, like if Caudrey's smart, he'll try and figure out a way to stay in Colorado. And I think that's why it's taking so long. All right. Oh, and then the goaltending tandem in Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado, every year now, right? They've done something a little out of the box with their goalies. And I'd say each time I think I've disagreed with what they've done, which kind of makes me dumb because they made it work, right? I thought letting Grubauer go I thought it was going to be a big mistake. And then Kemper comes in and he locks it down, no problem. And then now they're letting Kemper go. And they're going with Francouz and Georgiev. And I don't know, my initial reaction to that is, that's a mistake. But I was wrong last time, so.
Yeah, I thought it was
maybe
interesting.
Colorado is just so good that they can make mediocre goalies look great.
Well, if any defense can do it, it's probably Colorado, right?
Right.
They're pretty damn deep, so. Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Joe Sakic right away said we acquired Georgiev with the intention of making him our starter. Like, Tyler, we had talked about him in Edmonton lots, but he's largely an unproven goaltender, and I didn't think it made a lot of sense for Edmonton. I was surprised Colorado did it.
Yeah, I think they really believe in Francouz, but I think Edmonton made it to the conference final with Mike Smith, so I mean,
Goaltending doesn't matter.
I don't think it matters that much when you can score like they can score. So
Yeah,
and even in the
that's a good
playoffs, they
point.
still scored goals like most teams couldn't. So I think they're making a good bet and spending their money elsewhere. Unfortunately, it was on Nikushkin. And maybe they'll spend some on Caudrey too, and it'll be fine. But
There you go.
Hey, just never forget that the Flyers took the Blackhawks to 6 games in the Stanley Cup with Michael Layton.
yeah, think about that.
Like that's insane.
Did he even play again after that?
I think he bounced around and got a couple of games in here or there with other teams.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe if you don't score your troubles, it doesn't matter. I don't know. All right, let's
I think if you look at Kemper's numbers too, like they were average.
average
Like,
at best in the playoffs.
He did. There was one game and maybe the third period of that final game that he played like above average, but beyond that he was average.
He had like an 895 save percentage
Yeah.
in the playoffs. Like, he was not great. His regular season was pretty good. I think he had a 921.
Yeah.
But for me, the question with him is always going to be health too, right? Like, how many games are you realistically going to get out of him in the regular season? We'll talk about him a bit more in a little bit. First, I want to talk about Mason Marksman and the Dallas Stars. 4-year, $18 million deal. I like this, actually. They've got some good young talent in Dallas, and I do think he is a regression candidate, Mason Marksman. Just about a 15% shooting percentage last year. And his Tevish, Bruce, 12.1%. And his IPP was at 77, which I think is a bit high. So, no one expected him to be at a point per game, and he was very close last year. So I think he'll be a little less than that. I'm thinking 20 goals, 40 assists for 60 points in Dallas, depending on his deployment. But Mike or Tyler, Bruce, John, what do you guys think?
I think it sounds about right. He's not going to. The numbers he produced on fourth line minutes in Florida, he's not gonna be able to do that in Dallas. But he'll have a good season. I think it's pretty close.
Agreed.
I think 60 points is a little high.
I'm looking at it again. I might be a bit high there too. I probably agree with that, Tyler. But
Yeah.
if he can play the full season, maybe he gets close to it if he's in the top 6. I just don't think he's going to get power play time, like power play 1. I don't know. Hits a lot though, so if you're in a hits league like we are, some value there. But Mike, what's your sense on it?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I think this is one case where it's going to be kind of deployment sensitive. So I've got him, I think, at like a 55-point ceiling if he gets that second line spot.
Okay.
But that's not guaranteed. And I think in Florida he was used in more defensive-oriented minutes. And
Yeah.
Peter DeBoer doesn't really do that. If Bowness had stuck around in Dallas, that would have been interesting because he uses a forward line in heavy defensive minutes. I think it was Raffle and what's that other guy's name? I always can't remember his first name or his last name. I get them reversed. Fasca?
Radek.
Fasca, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they played really tough minutes. They high quality of competition and heavy defensive zone starts. And I think that might have been a really interesting look for Marchment after what he did in Florida. But that's not going to happen because DeBoer pretty much, he just runs his first and second line down your throat. He doesn't care what zone start, he doesn't care what's happening on the ice. If it's time to put hints out there, he puts them out there. So yeah, really, I don't know what's going to happen with Marchment. I think maybe he'll see second line if he's lucky.
Okay.
And I'm thinking maybe 55 points.
All right, and then not free agency signings, but I was curious about a couple players. So obviously John Klingberg has not signed anywhere yet. I think he would love to be in Dallas. Assuming he's not back, do you see kind of a big breakout season for Heiskanen, or is he just not that offensive number one defenseman where everyone's kind of hoping he is?
The biggest setback, I think, for him so far is that he's never really been given the top power play job exclusively.
Yeah.
So if Klingberg does ship out, I think we'll finally see the Heiskanen that everyone wants in fantasy.
So are you going to reach for Heiskanen in drafts next year?
I
asked
may.
it.
Trade secrets.
Tyler wants to know. Tyler wants to know.
Yeah, I will keenly look at his Yahoo ranking.
Okay. Fair enough. And then Jake Gottinger had a fantastic playoff run there. He looked basically unbeatable. Where do you kind of see him going in drafts next year? Like, I don't know if you're a 0G guy or if you fade goaltenders or anything like that, or if you're going to reach for, because I think he'll go fairly early compared to what he did last year, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, there was so much uncertainty regarding whether or not he would even play in the NHL this past season.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember writing in the draft kit, I wrote out like multiple scenarios for managers to consider. And I was like, look, there's very little chance that Ottinger is going to end up in the NHL. Like something big is going to have to happen. And of course, lots of crazy things started happening in Dallas. And yeah, I mean, he's set up pretty nicely for this upcoming season, right? Dallas has that incredible top line. They have a new coach who maybe will loosen the strings a little bit from a defensive perspective, which maybe won't be so good for the goaltender individually, but what I mean by that is it should open up the scoring for the team itself.
For sure. All right, let's talk about the Detroit Red Wings. I think they're one of the winners in free agency and at the draft this year. Andrew Kopp comes in, 5-year, $28 million contract for him. David Perron comes in as well, 2 years, 9.5. So a $4.75 million AAV. I thought that was great value for him. And not so much fantasy relevant, but Dominique Kubalik and Ben Sherratt as well. Ville Husso. Like, is this a team that they're starting to creep into playoff relevance? Like, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs next year, but they're starting to look as a whole pretty solid.
Yeah, I think.
Sorry. Insert the crickets. Where's my cricket button? Yeah.
Yes.
I wasn't sure if I started to see somebody talk there.
Everybody's screen just froze when he said Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I like about Detroit is that, one, they got rid of Blashill.
Yeah.
His deployment schemes were insane. I mean, as somebody who is constantly updating the line combinations for all 32 teams every day, Detroit was the team that saw the most rotation among the players. It wasn't until just this last season that they actually had a top line that stayed together for most of the year. And the bottom three lines were a disaster. They just flip-flop every single night. And to me, I think that's got to be madness for the players, to not know who you're playing with, what line you're playing with, what deployment you're going to get, and knowing that could change any night for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
And so to see Detroit go out and kind of, one, get rid of the coach, and two, solidify a second line. I mean, Detroit has two scoring lines now, right?
Yeah.
They've got the Larkin line up top, and now they've got this kind of what we think might be the second line involving Kopp, Perron, and Verana, right?
It's a solid second line.
Yeah, I mean, those are two lines you should be worried about now if you're an opposing team.
Absolutely. And Perron should see, I think he gets, like, I'm not sure if it's a bump because he was on a pretty solid line in St. Louis, but he's going to get power play time again. Like, he should be on that top power play. Like, and Kopp is a solid player in his own rights. And Verana, I don't think we've seen the full potential of him yet either. So this should be a fun line to watch. If you're a betting man, Mike, are they making the playoffs next year?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to check. Maybe you had some sort of crazy theory I wasn't aware of, but okay. I can't believe we've gone 45 minutes just about, and we barely talked about the Edmonton Oilers here. So it's about that time. I mean, Tyler's starting to twitch over there. He's got to talk about something Oilers related. Let's start with Evander Kane, because this one actually, I was pretty shocked waking up on July 13th and seeing that. Well, Tyler, you sent that message to the group. I'm glad you were right. I did not think he was coming back. I thought no way, no how. But Tyler, you were sure. So what was your immediate take on that, Tyler?
I was surprised at the term, for starters, only being 4 years, and the cap hit being that low as well. I think it's a great deal, but I think it also shows you that money wasn't out there and the term in the market for a guy that could score 40 or 45 goals. Even with his history, teams usually still pay those players, and that obviously wasn't out there. So I'm glad he's back, because it still left him with some flexibility to do other things.
Totally. How about the big brass ones on Kenny Holland? Hey, like, that was just a brilliant move by him. Yeah, go check the market. Have fun. See you later.
Yeah, well, and I think he had a good sense of what it looked like too, because any good teams are up against the cap, and there just wasn't money out there for it, especially without the cap going up for the last 2 or 3 seasons. Yeah. It was a smart move. He's made some stupid ones, but that was one of the smart ones.
I was going to say, it's not very often that Kenny Holland gets any praise on here.
Today he's getting some.
Everything he did that day and the next day were all really good moves. Like, Jack Campbell's up here next, but I think that it's more term and more money than he's probably worth, but that's what you pay. Like, I'd rather have Jack Campbell at that than Ville Husso.
Even Kemper, for that matter, Tyler. Like, being 2 years older and the same cap hit, basically.
Yeah, I was surprised, though, that Kemper didn't get that 6x6. I was actually pretty surprised. So, but I'd still rather have Jack Campbell.
Yeah, we want first half Jack Campbell.
Yeah,
For the whole
we don't
season.
want January, February, Jack Campbell. We don't want that.
No. Just so you guys know, I'm putting you on notice. I am keeping Evander Kane in both leagues that I have him. So you will not be getting Evander Kane for next season.
Whatever.
Oh, is ours the keeper league? Oh, it totally is, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So you get 3 keepers, buddy. So Kane will be one of mine. I think he's probably worth a top 3 round pick.
Malkin.
Yeah, watch him blow an Achilles somewhere in the preseason.
Malkin, you mean?
Just after the roster is set for the season.
Oh, boy. No,
blow
Bruce.
an Achilles out and you'll be stuck with your pick.
Why do you wish these things on people?
Horrible.
Sounds like John.
What?
I think Kane gets 45 goals.
You think 40? Okay, I was a bit conservative here. I said 37 goals, 38 assists for 75 points.
I still don't think he's going to play a ton on first power play unless he's sitting in front of the net. But I think that's kind of Hyman's spot.
Yeah.
But I still think like he can score goals 5-on-5, and he's going to play with McDavid, and he seemed to be in the right spot all the time. I think he can do it again. That was a big stretch of games that he consistently scored goals all the time.
Well, it's February through till mid June, right? So
Yeah, and almost all of it was 5-on-5 or shorthanded.
yeah.
And in the playoffs too, when everything tightens up. So
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I was a bit conservative, just thinking like there's kind of that mid-season lull that a lot of players, unless your name's McDavid, kind of fall into at some point or another, right? So I wasn't sure if Kane was going to keep up that scoring pace for a full 82 games. So that's kind of why I was a bit conservative on him. But he scored at almost a 50-goal pace over that stretch he was here last season. Mike, I'd like your take on this. What, as far as projections go for Evander Kane, what do you think? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm. There's a window kind of right in front of me, and as I was listening to you guys talk about Evander Kane, something flew into the window very loudly, like a bird or something. It made me jump, and like my legs hit the desk, and I don't know.
I thought you were jumping when I said 45 goals.
No, he started laughing. What?
No, like a bird or something of that size just hit my window and scared the crap out of me.
Eggs.
Eggs, yeah. So yeah, Evander Kane. Yeah, I like the signing. I'm glad he's back. I think he's going to do great. I think I have him a little bit lower on goals. I have him closer into the 36 to 38 range. Just because I think his percentages came in a little bit high last season. But yeah, he's going to be great. It's going to be, and Edmonton with what I think should be steady goaltending, not necessarily great, but just steady, is going to be a good team.
Okay, so they'll make the playoffs. You're telling us?
I think so.
Tyler, it was a joke. It was a joke. Come on, I'm kidding.
Bad one.
All right, let's move on. I guess Jack Campbell here. So I kind of see him getting somewhere, if he's healthy, somewhere between 50 to 55 starts, like 65% net share. Tyler, Bruce, is that the range you're looking at for Jack Campbell?
I think 50 is probably. I think he's only ever done that once.
Yeah.
And I think it might have been 49 games.
But they don't want to give Stuart Skinner like 35 starts though. Like that might be a touch much for Skinner, I'm thinking.
Yeah, probably, but I think it's the same thing that you're hoping, like Colorado, where you can outscore it. And really, is it going to be worse than Koskinen and Smith?
Probably not.
That's average. And like,
Yeah. Well,
can
and Skinner's
both of them
sample
give you
size is
average?
small, but sorry, I was gonna say Skinner's sample size is small, but he's been good in that small sample size. So if you can space him out and give him 35 games, that'd be ideal, I think.
And two, maybe just to keep Campbell fresh and try to avoid injury, right? Like you want him for the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I said 32 to 35 wins for Campbell too. I don't know if you guys agree with that or not, but
Yeah, I'm always a little reluctant to, when I read some of these statements about how many starts a goalie will get, because a lot of times they don't even come from the coach. And I think in Edmonton's case, I think it was the GM who said he wanted Skinner to get 30 starts. I thought I read that. I don't know where to find
Yeah, that was in one of
right
his
now.
press conferences.
But that's always weird to me, like to hear from the GM, because he's not the one deciding, right?
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the Rangers. What did you guys think of the Trocheck signing? 7 years, $39.375 million, so a $5.625 million AAV. I've heard lots of people complaining about the term. They said too long. Yeah, Tyler, you're nodding. You agree?
7 years is like way too long for a second line center, I think.
I think he's going to be effective. Like, I like Trocheck in New York playing alongside Panarin. I think he can have a good season next year. We've seen, like, his ceiling is 75 points. Like, I don't think, and Mike, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we'll ever see Trocheck above 75 points again.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Like, he's probably, I think for next year, I've got him at 24 goals and 56 points.
I think for a lot of these teams, when they're giving out those 7-year contracts to like B grade players, I think you're hoping that in year 4 of that, the cap's gone up $6 million.
Yep.
And you don't really have to worry about it. And I think that's what I would be hoping if I was signing those contracts.
Do you guys see him playing on power play 1, or is he going to be the odd man out there?
I don't know.
Because I kind of see him being on power play 1 personally, but I don't. That's far from guaranteed, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he got some time there in Carolina, right? And it was Strome who had that job for the Rangers.
Yeah.
And he's gone. So it seems it might be a natural switch there just to slide him in and see how that works.
For sure. Mike, what's your take on Yaroslav Halak? I think he can be a steady streamer, a spot start. Like, I kind of like him in New York, right? He's had more success on the East Coast. He didn't obviously play very well in Vancouver, but I think, and I like him too because of the schedule, because the Rangers have the most back-to-backs next season. I think they have 16. So I can see him, like, he's going to get at least 20 starts next year.
Yeah, I mean, that makes for a nice third goalie, right?
Yeah.
Guy who gets 20 starts on a team that's going to win a lot of games.
That should win a lot of games anyway.
Should, yeah.
Personal question, Mike. Do I keep Igor Shesterkin next season?
I would look to move him to Bruce for a second
That
rounder.
way I'd have him on both of my fantasy teams.
He's not
second rounder plus
giving up
John Gibson.
Kaprizov, though.
It depends whether he goes to jail back in Russia or not.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
He's
you might
still
get him.
there. He hasn't made it out of Russia yet. So
Oh, he's still there.
Interesting times there for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the
Well,
Flyers
shipping
just
to
lost their
Ukraine.
backup goalie, right? He's
Yeah.
in quotes,
Siberia.
Siberia, right? Like,
yep.
All right, let's talk about the New Jersey Devils. Andre Palat signs there, 5 years, $30 million. I'd say that's a little bit rich for what Palat can do. Like, he was great in the playoffs, and I think any team was going to end up overpaying for him. Tyler, you'd probably agree with that, I think. But I think he's basically a 15 to 18 goal, 50-point player. That's kind of how I see Andre Palat. And I don't think his fantasy value got a bump going to New Jersey. Unless, of course, he gets pasted to Jack Hughes' wing. But I don't know if that's guaranteed either. But, John, what's your thought? I haven't heard a lot from John yet today. I want to hear what John's take is on the New Jersey Devils and Andre Palat.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's high for him. You're right. He doesn't usually put up a whole lot. He has decent playoffs and then kind of disappears the rest of the way. And yeah, not a huge fan. But yeah,
He just doesn't like the guy.
He just doesn't like the guy.
I was trying to go through the whole thing without saying it. So. But no, $6 million for that. Yeah, no. I think 50 points is generous.
Okay. Yeah, he was producing at a 75-point pace in the playoffs, which is impressive. But he also shot at almost 23%. So obviously not sustainable there, but
No.
That ish.
it's iffy.
The way Kucherov was feeding him, I could probably score that many points playing with Kucherov.
He's not
And
that
I
good
can't
either.
skate.
I think 50 points is pretty accurate. I also think he got that $1 million UFA bump.
Yeah.
I'll agree to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had that real nice season when Kucherov skipped the regular season. Remember that year?
He was injured, remember?
Yeah, he was injured for the whole year
Yeah.
and got better in April. But, Palat
Amazing.
Tripped over the blue line and hurt himself.
Palat got the prime power play spot while Kucherov was out that season. And then, of course, in the playoffs this year, he turned it on. So, yeah, good for him for cashing in. But that's that's kind of a sad prize for the Devils after losing out on Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah, no question. Do we even want to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks? Is that worth mentioning at all?
Boo.
Dumpster fire.
What a
Dumpster
joke.
fire.
Yeah,
Like Edmonton-
they are.
Edmonton was
they were one of the
bad.
teams that I listed out of the 13 of 14 teams that went for the top 5 picks. So they remember how they won, and they're going back to the well, right?
I hope it doesn't work. I hope they end up losing the lottery and pick 6th and screw up the pick. They're the worst. Edmonton was bad for forever and got first overall picks. And this, like, what they're doing is worse than what Edmonton was doing. Edmonton was actually trying, and they were just that bad.
Oh yeah.
Like, they were actually trying to win, but were just horrible. And
Because
Chicago
Ryan
was
Smith
just
was
like,
their best player.
Easy.
Chicago just decided, like, we're not even gonna, like, pretend we're not trying to do this.
Yeah, they are actively doing everything to suck.
Take everything for nothing, even if it fits into our age group, even if we'll have the money to re-sign DeBrincat, which they would with Kane and Taves coming off, who aren't going to resign.
Nope.
Kirby Doc, who's like 21, and like you probably could have, even if he had ARP rights, probably could have still got him on a decent contract. Just like take him and go, and then we're gonna pick this player that really wasn't even supposed to be sitting there at 7th overall. Like, they're the worst. They're the worst.
And then we're going to sign 2 of the worst goalies in the NHL.
Yeah,
As our
on
tandem.
purpose.
On purpose.
After what they did like last year, bringing in Fleury and signing all these guys, and then they're like, never mind, we're gonna do the exact opposite.
Well, that team next year, from the trade deadline on, they will be the worst team in hockey. Like, they're gonna flip Patrick Kane. You know he's gonna be gone. They're gonna try to move Seth Jones somehow. It probably won't happen at the deadline. That might be an off-season thing. Hey, Tyler, I don't know if they can move.
It's just so much money.
Yeah,
and
like that might have to happen in the
term.
off-season, but
Yeah.
they're going to be bad. So bad, in fact, that Max Domi and Andreas Athanasiou are probably going to be in their top 6.
And
Well, they're
And
going
they
to be in the
s-
top 6. It's not.
they suck so much they still give them $3 million each.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, it's going to be bad. It's going to be ugly.
it's bad.
Okay, we won't talk about that anymore. Let's move on to the Ottawa Senators. They've kind of been the hot topic, Mike, as you alluded to earlier this offseason. Give us a breakdown on Claude Giroux. What do you think next season holds for your former favorite player?
Trash.
Trash. Yeah, so I'm looking at probably a shift to the right side and playing on Ottawa's second line, maybe with Tim Stützle and possibly DeBrincat on the left.
I agree.
He has a reasonable shot at playing on that first power play unit. And so I think he could sniff 70 points for fantasy managers out there.
Okay, so I wasn't out to lunch.
I don't know off the top of my head if Tim Stützle is good at faceoffs, but I do know that Claude Giroux is better than him because Claude Giroux is the best faceoff guy in the universe. So I wonder what's going to happen there. Because, in Philadelphia, Giroux played the left side the past few years, but he continued taking faceoffs, at least quite a bit of faceoffs. So I do wonder about that. If you're in a league that counts faceoffs, that might be something to think about.
Stützle, he's at 37.6% on his for his career.
Okay, so yeah, Giroux will probably step in a lot then on that line.
Giroux's better.
Yeah, but speaking of Stützle, I think he's a big beneficiary of these moves, right? Like last year he was a good fantasy player with basically nobody in the second line, and now he's got a real shot to play with the Brinkett and Giroux.
Yeah, that could be real nice.
Like that's another player I'm going to be looking at in drafts next season.
Yeah, I like those players like that too, where their line mates change drastically from one year to the next, because usually that doesn't get anticipated in the kind of these general rankings you see at Yahoo and ESPN.
Yeah.
And so kind of your standard manager that's not doing a lot of research is like, okay, well, I can get Stützle in round 10. Not this year.
No chance, bud. Cam Talbot, what's your take on Cam Talbot here? So he obviously traded to the Senators for Philip Gustafsson. So I think this helps Marc-Andre Fleury. Like Bruce, you had mentioned, he's now the unquestioned starter in Minnesota. So I think he gets a big bump.
Sure.
But now in Ottawa, you've got Talbot and you've got Forsberg. And I kind of see those guys, whether it's 60-40 or 50-50, it's going to be close to just a split down the middle. But what do you think?
Yeah, I like that Talbot signing. It's a nice gamble on a guy who has performed at a decent level on a couple of different teams. I know he's been bad on a couple of teams as well. But he was fine in Minnesota. He was excellent in New York when he played for the Rangers. So I'm curious to see how he does in that Ottawa jersey. I like him as seeing a few more starts than you. I'm not as sold on Forsberg. I know he had a great season last year.
Yep.
But I don't know if I see him as a long-term option in net for them.
Okay, so you kind of see Talbot maybe leaning more towards being the true starter there in Ottawa.
I do, yeah.
Okay. I think he's got the potential there. I in a small sample size like what Forsberg did last season. Like he was.
Yeah, he did have a nice year last year.
For sure. All right, Josh Norris. This guy, he has a high shooting percentage. I think he's like last year was it 20%, over 20%. I know you had thrown a stat at us one time. Like very few players finish above 20% through the course of the regular season. I think he's averaging around 18% so far in his career. Do you see him, like, is that a guy who's just going to be an 18 to 20% shooter, or should we expect a big regression or big step back from Norris next year?
Yeah, I'm not really expecting a huge drop-off here. I mean, I definitely wouldn't count on him repeating that 20. But you're right. Like, he's had multiple years now where his shooting percentage is sky high. Anybody know offhand what he's at for career shots at this point?
I could probably tell you. 277.
Okay, so that's
18.8% on his career.
That's still a little low then. I hadn't realized that number was so low. So I would attach a little risk to that then. That high shooting percentage for under 300 shots, there's still some potential for that to come down.
Okay. I mean, I had him at 37 goals and 69 points. I don't know. Yeah, I thought you guys liked that one. I was going to put 70. I thought, no, for Tyler's benefit.
I think 37, 40 goals is probably right on where I'll be.
Like, I think if Batherson and Tkachuk, if that line's healthy and they play together, I think it's a reasonable expectation. But I just that shooting percentage concerns me. Okay, the moment John has been waiting for. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Evgeny Malkin, signs for 4 years, $24.4 million, $6.1 million AAV. I've got his fantasy value is basically unchanged for next year. He's going to play with the same players. He's going to get injured 13 games in. He'll be
Don't say
out till
that.
April.
Don't say that. You're probably right.
Yeah.
John, are you a Malkin owner or are you a Malkin fan in real life?
Both.
Okay.
Poor guy.
Yeah, that Kane jersey behind me was almost a Malkin one. So
There's still time. You got 4 years now. You can buy a Malkin jersey. Have it up there.
I know. I'm excited.
I've got, if he's healthy, I've got him at 34 goals and 83 points. That's kind of my just very loose projection for Malkin.
So cut it in half.
Maybe cut it in half. Yeah. Total final production. Yeah. 41 points.
Yeah. I was super happy to see him in Pittsburgh again. Surprised by the contract, possibly. I didn't think he was going to get 4 years, but I'll take it. 6.1, just by his history, yeah, it seems a bit rich, but
He had to get that Letang money though.
yeah.
I'm okay with it. I guess I wouldn't have given him 4 years probably if it were me, but they're trying to just win now with their aging superstars, right? So
They're going to be so bad in 3 years.
they will. They absolutely
so
will.
Bad. So bad.
They certainly will. Yeah, and yeah. I do like it's clear now they're just trying to win with these guys while they can still play, right? Like the Ty Smith trade, the Jeff Petrie trade. I think Jeff Petrie's going to have a bounce back season. Like I think he'll get closer to that 40-point production that we've kind of gotten used to seeing from him.
Guy's trash.
What an awful trade. What an awful trade.
From Montreal's perspective.
No, Montreal did great.
Okay, you don't like Petrie in Pittsburgh, eh?
I don't like Petrie. Like, how are they going to get up and down the ice? Like, their whole team, their average age has got to be like 36. Like, Petrie's old. They didn't keep any salary. He's still got term. And Mike Matheson had, I think, like 6 years left on his contract at just over 4.
Yeah.
I mean, Petrie's just going to be another year older. That production's going to go down. And they got Ryan Poehling, too, which is, I think, a perfect fit in Pittsburgh. It's Pittsburgh's kind of player in the bottom 6 that could probably move up and down.
Yep.
I think they did really good.
Yeah, I like Petrie for next year. You guys like? So Ty, you're saying production's going down. Like, what kind of production are you expecting from Petrie? He won't be as bad as he was in Montreal last year. There's no chance.
No, but I mean, he's not going to play like Letang's still there.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So I think he's just going to be like a 30, 35 point puck moving second pairing.
Yeah.
21 minutes.
Does he break double digits in goals?
No, I don't think so. I think he gets like 5. I really do. Like, Letang's going to play 3.5 minutes of power play time a night probably.
Yeah, he won't get any power play time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, unless, I mean, there's always the chance that Letang goes down. He's been pretty durable the last couple seasons, right? But the story with Letang has kind of always been he's had issues staying healthy, right? So all it takes is one injury, and Petrie probably gets power play one time. Like, just something to keep an eye on, right? I think he could. He's run a power play before. If Letang goes down, that's next guy up.
yeah.
But that's a bunch of what ifs, right? So I do like some of the moves they made for Jari's benefit too, and I mentioned that on Twitter. I think Tristan Jari's going to have a good season next year.
Based on switching up to the D?
Just on, I mean, I like some of the depth moves. I like Petrie. I like bringing Ty Smith in. They still have what's his name, Pierre-Olivier Joseph or whatever his name is, and Letang just being healthy. I think, and then if Malkin can stay healthy too, that team will be better next year. In my opinion, they're still kind of like they're aging. I don't disagree with you, Tyler. Like they're getting older, and in 3 years they will be pretty bad. But I think they can still be competitive next season.
Yeah.
Just wondering how much more we want to cover here, guys. Let's talk about the Maple Leafs because we like to shit on those guys every once in a while, right? we're over an hour here, so we're not going to cover everything. But I mean, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think, Mike, what was your take on them bringing in? Well, I guess their goaltending tandem in general.
Yeah. So they took 2 swings, right? Now I'm crying. I coughed and it made my eye water. Crying on national television in 2 countries. All right. So, for Toronto, who do we have again? We have Samsonov came in.
And Matt Murray.
And Matt Murray. So it really feels to me like it's 2 rolls of the dice, right? Neither guy has established himself as capable of being very good in the NHL. Samsonov's, I think he's closing in on 3,000 shots against, and his save percentage is very low. I mean, it's in the bucket of below average for his career. And of course, he had a really poor season last year. And then you have Matt Murray, who, on the average, his number is not terrible for his save percentage, but it's split into two Matt Murrays. There's one that for like 3 seasons he was pretty darn good, and then there's one for 3 seasons where he was pretty darn bad. And they don't alternate. Like, it's just there's 3 good and then 3 bad. And so which Matt Murray are you going to get now? Is Toronto's defense so good that they're going to make Matt Murray look good?
I don't know about that.
I don't think so.
I'm going to say
Is
no.
Toronto's offense so good that they can excuse having Matt Murray back there? That may be true, but it doesn't seem to be as good as Colorado.
I think it's a ballsy bet, and not very often do you see a team bet on 2 guys for that same position. If it works out, it could work out really well. Like maybe Samsonov figures it out. I don't think he will. I think it's more likely that Matt Murray plays at league average, maybe just slightly above. But yeah, you don't see too many teams bring in 2 new guys and make bets on both of them.
Yeah, and Matt Murray, he's one of these guys. I kind of have a short list I keep, and again, I don't have any proof of what I'm going to say is true, because it's very difficult to get accurate measurements of like goalies' body features and their pads. But ever since the league changed the equipment sizing on the goalies, there have been a handful of goalies whose numbers drastically changed after the NHL changed the rules. And some of those goalies just happen to be quite lanky. So tall but skinny. And so they got put into the bucket where their pads had to change because of their height. And all of a sudden they sucked at being an NHL goalie.
I think he's, 6'4", 180 or something like that?
Yeah, he's a tall, skinny dude.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure if it lines up perfectly, but I believe in the last few years, if you look at Murray's numbers, they're pretty weak.
I think Kevin Woodley would probably have some stats on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, for instance, I'm intimately familiar with Martin Jones being in that group as well. Martin Jones had really decent NHL numbers for several years, including in San Jose at the very beginning. If you remember, Martin Jones was actually traded for a first-round pick. So at one time, a lot of people believed Martin Jones was an NHL goalie. And then once those pad changes came in, he never posted above .900 again, which is ridiculous. Like, he went from being a guy traded for a first-rounder to a guy who couldn't post AHL numbers.
He had some pretty nice numbers there for a while. Like, there was a stretch again. Was it in San Jose, or I can't remember where, but he had some time above 920, above 930. Like, he was he looked reasonable. Back to Matt Murray. He's listed at 6'4", 202.
that 202 seems generous based on pictures of him.
It could be like recent pictures. Yeah, maybe he is down to 180, but that's
Looks
on the
horrible recently.
That's yeah, he does. He looks a little bit rough. That's according to the NHL's website. So
Just a little.
That number was taken after he finished at the buffet.
That's
okay.
with the pads on.
with the pads on.
The old pads too.
The old pads, right?
With lead weights in the bottom.
Okay, so for fantasy purposes, Bruce, you're not always opposed to tandems, right? I mean, you've done that a couple times here. Is the Toronto tandem, are you touching that with a 10-foot pole? Like, do you think there's any potential with either goaltender for next season playing in Toronto?
For me, I kind of look at it differently. I would lean more towards Samsonov myself rather than Matt Murray. I think Samsonov will attempt to try to take the reins here and run with it. He's still young. Like I said, somewhat unproven, but I think I said at the outset when they signed him, I think he'll be the guy that saves Dubas' job at the end of the season. Because I think Matt Murray is going to flame out epically during the season, and I think Samsonov's going to be the one that's going to hold the Leafs in there. And if both goalies flame out, well, there'll be lots of people leaving in the fall or in the spring in Toronto, and Dubas will be one of them.
Yeah.
I kind of tend to agree with you, Bruce. I don't know if Murray's going to crash and burn necessarily, but I do like the potential with Samsonov. I think he could potentially find himself, but it's a gamble I'd take late in the draft, or maybe if I can pluck him off the waiver wire.
Neither goaltender is going to go early. They're going to be, if you do the 0G thing, I think both of them will be there at the end.
Those are good candidates for a 0G strategy.
I think the only way they're not still there at the end is because Yahoo or ESPN ranked them way higher than they should be based on what team they're on.
Which we've
somebody's
seen.
Somebody's gonna auto draft them by accident.
The Alec Martinez of this season.
I love looking at that list every year because I mean, I'm not even really mocking them. As someone who has to handle the projections for 600 to 700 players, I make mistakes every year. I try to catch them, but I do make mistakes. But it's just fun to watch some of the mistakes that pop up. Like a few years ago when Eric Gustafsson was on the Philadelphia Flyers, Yahoo put 2 Eric Gustafssons into their system. And there were 2 Eric Gustafssons who have played for the Flyers. One of them was active, and he's the one who's really crappy at even strength but gets some power play time. And the other one hadn't played in the NHL in a few years. And they both were in the system, and the guy who wasn't in the NHL was ranked way higher than the one who was in the NHL.
I think Alec Martinez was ranked 15th overall. Was it last year?
In our ESPN league last year.
In the ESPN league, it was really high.
And somebody auto drafted and of course ended up with that player in sometime in the second round. It was just terrible.
Very
them right.
Very early in the second round.
Yeah.
Everything needs its.
I think something happened with the ESPN system last year, right? Because they also didn't assign forward positions until like a couple days. Like either they did it after the season started or just a couple days before it started. So just everyone was a forward. And people were complaining, sending in notes, hey, why don't we have left wings? Why don't we have right wings? Blah, blah, blah. And
I do recall that actually, yeah. They had it set. It was at least for the first week, it was sitting at all forwards.
And so people drafted, forwards. And then all of a sudden, there were positions assigned to them. And it didn't always work out so well for people.
Yeah, that's
I think everyone who auto drafts deserves to have like 1 or 2 just bad picks thrown in there. Like right at the start too, like second, third round, give them something junk.
just blow up your draft.
Yep.
Yeah.
We did an auction draft a few years ago, and it was the year that Victor Olofsson came on the scene for the Buffalo Sabres. And there was rumors that he might line up with Jack Eichel. And people were like, oh, who is this guy? What's his background? How many goals is he going to score? And I did a terrible thing, but it was funny at the time. I was the first person in the auction to do a nomination in round 1. Or well, there's no rounds, I guess. You just start nominating people. But I was first overall. And I nominated Gustav Olofsson for $1 just to see who really had done their research on the right Olsen, and there was one guy who outbid me for Gustav Olsen.
That's pretty funny.
That was fun.
Okay, last team I just wanted to cover briefly here, guys, the Washington Capitals. Obviously they signed Dylan Strome, $3.5 million. I thought that was probably a good bet for a few teams to try him out for 1 year, see what he could do. Excuse me. I think he'll slide into 2C. Could have 20-ish goals and 50-something points. I think is probably what I would expect from Dylan Strome playing on the second line. They brought in Conor Brown. They traded the Senators, second-round pick. I kind of wonder about that one, Tyler, because he was linked to the Oilers, right? Conor Brown. I think he would have been a good fit, whether it was a second or third line somewhere. But he was an effective player, I thought, for what the Oilers needed. And then Darcy Kemper, of course, signed in Washington. So I think he'll get 50 to 55 starts in Washington. So, Tyler, Conor Brown. What's your thoughts there?
I'm okay with the Oilers kind of missing out on him. Second round pick is it's a lot to give up, and the cap hit was pretty high. It's 3.6. I think he probably would have scored 20 or maybe 25 goals in Edmonton. I don't think he's going to do that in Washington. And I know he is a little bit smaller, but he does kind of play an aggressive game. I think Edmonton, that would have for sure meant that Puyarvi was gone. I think right now there's probably still a bit of a chance for him to stay, but
it doesn't sound like, well, talking about Puyarvi, get off track for, like, it doesn't sound like there's a market for him, right? But at the number the arbitrator is going to give him. Like, it's going to be around $3 million, and I don't know. I don't think teams are going to want to. It's the same with, like, every team's getting squeezed. So to give him that much money, and I think if you look at that, if you didn't get Warren Foegele, you'd still have room. And I think you're more likely to get something for Puyarvi than you are for Warren Foegele with term left. So yeah, it'd be nice to see the Oilers do something and try and move one or both of Warren Foegele or Tyson Barrie and try and clear up some cap space. Like, I think they got to repurpose that money somehow, right?
I'd much rather they do it with. Obviously, we're a little off track, but I think it'd be a lot better if they do that with Warren Foegele than with Tyson Barrie.
Sure.
If offensive right shot defenseman at a good cap hit with a little bit of turn left, I'd much rather hold on to that than a guy that's going to do nothing on the fourth line, can't kill penalties for almost $3 million.
Yeah, we want him gone for sure, no question.
Yeah, gone. Bye.
Okay, and then Darcy Kemper. Bruce, your thoughts on him for Washington next season? I think 5 years, $26.25 million. I've got his fantasy value going down. I think moving from Colorado to Washington, I don't think that's a stretch. But he is going to be the unquestioned starter. What's your thoughts on it?
He's going to get the chance, right? Because their backup is. They signed Lingard, who had 3 starts last year in the NHL. So
I think it was 5 starts, Bruce.
Five starts.
Yeah.
So Kemper's going to be the undisputed number one. He's going to give them some stability as long as he stays healthy. So that will be a benefit to the entire team. Because last year was kind of a train wreck in their goaltending increase. They probably should have went to Home Depot and got some plywood instead of using their goaltenders. But he'll give some stability, and I think he'll do well. Washington has a decent defense, so I think overall, I think your projections here, like you said, 50 to 55 starts, 30 wins. I don't think you're too far off there.
Okay. Like you mentioned, Charlie Lindgren. Do we see him getting 25 to 30 starts? Like I don't think they want to. They don't want to overwork Darcy Kemper next year, right? So, but do they trust Charlie Lindgren enough to give him that number of starts?
I think they're hoping that the small sample size is that they're not gonna tax Kemper, and if Lindgren performs well in the starts that he gets at the beginning of the season, I think as the season goes on, he'll get more starts as long as he continues to play well. If he doesn't play well, then they're gonna have to take their chances with Kemper. But if he can perform well early in the season, he'll get a few more starts as the season progresses, so they can take some stress off of Kemper.
Okay. Mike or John, any other thoughts on the Capitals, Kemper, Strome, either or?
Yeah, for the Capitals, I'm a little worried just from a fantasy perspective as to how to handle this team. You know, you've got Backstrom and Wilson out for a considerable amount of time, especially Backstrom. And so how do you treat these players? Like, you've got Strome coming in as a 2C, but for how long? And what happens, say, if Backstrom does make it back healthy, say in February, where does Strome go?
The wing? Does he go to the wing?
Strome get pushed to the wing? And if he does, well, Wilson's coming back. So what happens to Conor Brown? And you just have all these question marks about, and again, the big picture here, and I haven't said yet, is that Washington cannot afford these players. If you look at their salary cap, when Wilson and Backstrom come back, they can't function as a team. Like they have to remove these guys from the roster. And it's not going to be just like one or two guys shuffled to the AHL. They're going to have to trade salary for nothing. So if you draft, a Strome or a Brown here, you have to understand that they may not even be on the Capitals.
I think Conor Brown, if he does stay, he's going to be playing third line minutes once Wilson's back. Most likely, right? It's on that right side. You'll have Wilson, Oshie, and then Conor Brown. But I really, if I were putting money on it, I'd bet Backstrom's not back. Like that hip resurfacing surgery is supposed to be pretty intense, and the players that have had it done have either not come back at all, or they've played very little when they do.
Yeah, and I mean, as terrible as it sounds, Washington kind of needs that to happen. Maybe yes. As I said, they can't afford this roster.
Yeah.
So
I don't think. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
I said I don't see Backstrom playing this season. I think that's why they signed Strome for 1 year. So they're going to fill in. They're going to give Backstrom a year to get healthy, and then they're going to see what happens next year. And if he's not healthy, well, then they'll figure it out then. But yeah, Strome right now is going to fill that spot for this season. I think he's locked into that spot for the season.
Yeah, so his value could be kind of nice then if he hangs on to that spot.
Okay. All right, boys. Last thing before we go here, because we forgot to do it during our mid-roll, but as a member of the Hockey Podcast Network, the Fantasy Hockey Hacks podcast is a proud partner of DraftKings, Tyler. The action never ends at DraftKings Sportsbook, especially this summer with tons of ways to bet on all your favorite sports. You can fuel your fandom and feel the heat of the season like never before. Plus, right now, DraftKings Sportsbook is giving new customers a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's right, make your first bet up to $1,000, and if it doesn't win, you'll get another shot to cash in. You can throw down on all the major action for baseball, golf, MMA, and more. Plus, with same-game parlays, spreads, money lines, over-unders, and props, your betting options feel endless. Best of all, DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. You can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Make your first deposit and get a risk-free bet up to $1,000. That's promo code THPN, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Check the show notes for details. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, crisis counseling and referral services are available. There it is. I didn't Ron Burgundy that one this year, or this episode, so we can move on. The last thing I'll mention during this episode, because we've run for an hour and a half here now, Ask the Hacks is still running, so if you do have questions for us, be sure to send them in at fantasyhockeyhacks@gmail.com and enter to win a free 1-year subscription to the Left Wing Lock iPhone app. And with that, Mike, thank you very much for joining us again for an hour and a half and chatting all things fantasy hockey. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you guys for having me on.
And we'll have to talk more about the draft kit when it's available. We're looking forward to that when it comes out, and looking forward to next season. Should be a lot of fun. And then last thing here, just a reminder, if you want to follow us on social media, go check us out on Twitter at FHHacks, on Instagram at Fantasy Hockey Hacks, and be sure to check out our website, fantasyhockeyhacks.com, for more fantasy hockey-related content. All right, boys. Talk to you next week.
Bye, Felicia.
Take care.
Oh, man.